Welcome to Ask Leo Answercast number 149. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be answering questions that people are asking out at AskLeo.com. Today's Answercast is brought to you by the best of Ask Leo. You know, I've been answering questions on Ask Leo since August of 2003. In that time, I've answered quite literally thousands of questions. The Best of Ask Leo is a separate email subscription where, once a week, you'll get exactly what that name implies. A complete article from the Ask Leo archives that I've actually hand-selected as one of my best. These are the most important, the most popular, the most educational, the most helpful, sometimes even the most controversial. But you get the idea. These are the best. Head out to bestofaskleo.com and sign up for your subscription today. I had Microsoft Security Essentials installed for my antivirus in my Windows Vista, but it was still infected with malware that was added from the search site Conduit. I removed it, Conduit, and all its garbage, but I kept getting malware detections when I did a security scan. My Microsoft Security Essentials kept getting turned off when I shut down my computer. So when I turned my computer on again, I had to turn Microsoft Security Essentials back on. So I downloaded BullGuard because I tried the free version a while ago and it worked great. Well, it also caught the malware, but I went through the process a few times before it deleted the malware. Also, my main computer profile will not open since View Password was part of the malware and the antivirus deleted it and my profile is closed. So I had to make a new profile. But strangely, I can open the closed profile in safe mode. My scans are clean now for the last 3 days, or so it says, so that problem appears to be gone. I have no more malware or virus notices. I also deleted all temp files and other non-essential files that were downloaded on that date as well. My problem is this. My computer is very slow now. I have 3 bars of internet and plenty of disk space, so it should be faster. I keep it cleaned and defragged, but many times now I have to refresh to do anything online and sometimes offline. So I'm wondering if the malware has somehow embedded itself and hiding in my antivirus. Is that possible, or am I just paranoid? I wonder if it's really cleaned. What is the best and safest way to be sure and the best cleaner that you would recommend? The best and the safest way? Well, you are just not going to like my answer. After everything that your machine has been through, and it's quite a bit, I can tell you, I believe that yours is a scenario that actually calls for the ultimate cleaning. What that means is back up your computer completely, reformat and reinstall Windows, reinstall all of your applications, and restore your data. Yes, it's painful, and I'll throw a few other ideas at you in a second, but in your shoes, with everything that machine has gone through and with that machine in its current state, the reformat/reinstall route is in fact the route that I would personally take. One problem here is that malware is messy. Or more correctly, removing malware is messy. There's really no way to know everything that malware might do. So there's just no way to know what all can and should be safely removed when you're cleaning it up. The emphasis being on safely, of course. Which means absolutely, there could definitely be things left behind. You might very well be safe from the malware that's been removed, meaning you're no longer at risk of infecting another machine or acting as a bot in a botnet or whatever else the malware was originally designed for, but the memory lingers in the form of poor performance. I know of no tool that we can just drop in that would magically make things all better for you. So I promised you a couple of things. I'll call them straws to grasp at. You mentioned that you installed an additional anti-malware package. It sounds like this has left you with 2, BullGuard and Microsoft Anti-Malware. I would uninstall one of them and make sure that the other is still working. 2 anti-malware tools can come into conflict, and there is a chance that part of the performance issue is exactly that. If browsing the web is getting painful, you mentioned needing to refresh pages to get them to view, I would consider a couple of additional things. clearing your browser cache, or uninstalling and reinstalling the browser completely, or installing and using a different browser. Malware is definitely known to impact browsers adversely. If either of those ideas work, consider yourself very, very lucky. Also, please consider backing up regularly. That way, when you get an infection again, you can remove it quickly by just restoring the previous day's backup. But right now, my money's on your needing to reinstall from scratch. And for that, I'm sorry. We have an XP computer that we use for file backup. It needs to connect to our internal network, but has absolutely no need to connect to the internet. Is there a way, for security reasons, to have no connection to the internet, but still stay connected to our local network? Because our existing backup system works so well, we would prefer not to have to update this computer at this time. Yours is a variation on a very common idea that's been cropping up from time to time lately. Unfortunately, there are in fact a couple of problems with it. First, I'm just not aware of an easy way to make it happen. I believe the normal solution would take a more powerful or more complex router than most people have. It really is a routing issue, I believe, since it's the router that would need to block that computer's attempts to connect out to the internet. Perhaps there's a hack out there that I'm unaware of, but it would seem that any such attempt would be, well, complex at least, risky, and perhaps even fragile. And it doesn't really get you the security that you think it might. Remember an old adage you may have heard in high school or grade school health class? When you kiss someone, it's like you're kissing everyone they've ever kissed? At least I think it was kissing. Anyway, the point that they were making was that human bacteria and viruses spread through contact. The same is true for computers. And in fact, that's one reason we call viruses viruses. They replicate and propagate through contact. Now, eliminating internet connectivity from your XP box does make direct contact to the internet go away. However, it leaves that machine connected to your local network, which means it leaves that indirect contact in place. So, yes, your XP box could still be vulnerable to things that come in through other systems on your network. Yes, it's a much smaller possibility, but it is a possibility that most definitely remains. In fact, it doesn't really even have to be networking. Transferring data back and forth via USB sticks is another possible vector. But being connected to your local network is definitely something that makes the machine still more vulnerable than you'd really want it to be. And of course, removing internet connectivity from the XP box means that any anti-malware tools that are actually on the Windows XP machine will not be able to keep themselves up to date. They won't be able to update their database of malware definitions. Microsoft Security Essentials will continue to be updated for at least another year, and other anti-malware tools perhaps even longer than that. Given the risk of second-hand infection anyway, you still want that anti-malware tool updated. So, in a case like this, my recommendation remains: turn on the XP firewall, make sure your anti-malware tools are updating themselves regularly, and then use that machine for as little as possible. This is perhaps the single biggest thing you can do to reduce the exposure. I was thinking about purchasing Microsoft Word, which I had on my last computer. I'd use it occasionally to make lists, etc. I think it costs around $100 or perhaps even less. I don't need Office, etc., just Word. I happened to read this article on freebies, and it mentioned something called OpenOffice. So, I need your suggestion. Is this something I should download, or am I better off purchasing Word? I assume that OpenOffice works the same as Word. OpenOffice can be a really effective replacement or alternative to Microsoft Word and even some of the other Microsoft Office applications, but it really depends on exactly how you use those applications, and, even more importantly, perhaps who you might be sharing your documents with. OpenOffice and the similar LibreOffice are completely free suites of programs. Libre is what's called a fork of OpenOffice that was created some years ago, mostly due to internal politics as I understand it. Both are good, though their feature sets have diverged somewhat from each other over time. I'll use the phrase OpenOffice from here on out, but really my comments apply to both OpenOffice and LibreOffice. They each include a word processor comparable to Microsoft Word, a spreadsheet comparable to Microsoft Excel, presentation software comparable to PowerPoint, a database comparable to Microsoft Access, as well as drawing and math equation tools similar to what's included in Microsoft Office. Now, I say comparable because, of course, they are not exactly the same. OpenOffice will look and feel different than Microsoft Office. The fundamental concepts are all the same, but the design of the user interface will in fact have things in different places. That may or may not matter to you. OpenOffice will probably not have all of the advanced features that Microsoft Office may have. Exactly what those missing features might be will vary over time as both suites continue to change and grow. If you never use those advanced features, again, this too may not matter to you at all. OpenOffice can in fact read and write documents that were created with Microsoft Office. On the surface, that would imply that you can happily exchange documents with people that use Microsoft Office. But herein lies perhaps what I would call the biggest issue with OpenOffice. The document you create in OpenOffice may look different when it's opened in Microsoft Office. The programs are compatible with each other in that they can both read and write the same file formats, but in practice they are not identical. Formatting differences in your resulting documents are very common when you exchange those documents between the two. If that matters to you, and I know that it can matter to a number of people, then OpenOffice may not be the best choice. One other thing OpenOffice has going for it, of course, is cross-platform support. It's the only solution on Linux and often comes as part of a Linux distribution. And of course, it's available for both Mac and PC, and all of the versions are identical with each other. And naturally, it's completely free. Is it a suitable alternative? Well, again, it depends really on your needs. If your needs are moderate to basic in complexity and visual compatibility with Microsoft Office isn't really a concern for you, then it could very well be a very good and clearly inexpensive alternative. Unfortunately, if you're a Microsoft Office power user or you expect to use Microsoft Office add-ons, or you need to exchange high-fidelity documents with other Microsoft Office users, then typically only Microsoft Office will do. Hi there. I've been using my Yahoo email since 2009, and I've never had problems with receiving so many spams into my inbox folder. But recently, within the last 2 weeks, there was an abrupt influx of some spams claiming that I'd won lotteries, other that I'm eligible to their belongings, and they're all managing to authenticate themselves to Yahoo's servers because I'm finding themselves in my inbox folder, not my spam folder. Now, I know that these are scams, but my question is, why is it, after all these years of using my email, I'm now encountering this problem? Spam and spam fighting is a really complex game of what I'll call cat and mouse. Spammers are constantly trying to find their way into your inbox. I have a few ideas of what could possibly have happened in your situation. Spam filtering services can sometimes actually get overloaded, and as a result, choose not to filter at all. Rather than delay or deny what might be legitimate email, they elect instead to simply deliver it without processing it, even if they can't run their spam analysis on it. This doesn't happen often, but it can happen, and it would manifest as a sudden influx of spam. Another thing, accounts can get hacked. You said that they can somehow authenticate. Now, one way that they can do that is if they have hacked someone's Yahoo account. Now they can use that account to send spam, even spam that looks like it comes from a non-Yahoo address. A spammer may have found a new loophole. As I said, it's a game of cat and mouse. Spammers are constantly looking for new tricks and new techniques that'll bypass existing spam filters. They may just have found a new one. If that's the case, I would expect the spam filter to continue the game of cat and mouse by eventually catching up, figuring out that loophole, plugging it to stem the tide. Using the junk or spam button on email in your inbox that is obviously spam is in fact one way you can help. Now, you may just have gotten onto a new spammers list. Spammers can make money by selling their lists to one another. If your name was on one such list, you may now be getting spam from a completely new source that isn't yet recognized by the spam filter. Once again, I'd expect the spam filter to eventually catch up. And once again, using the junk or spam button on that kind of email can help speed up the process just a little. Since there's actually zero absolute accountability in email, meaning that it's trivial to forge where email comes from, it's nearly impossible to stop all spam. As you've seen, this kind of thing can come in waves. The best thing that you can do is to simply use the spam or junk button on spam email in your inbox and just not get too worked up about it. Can I delete what my anti-malware program puts into its quarantine? Typically, yeah, but it's important to first understand just exactly what quarantine is and why it exists. One thing that anti-malware scanners do is identify files on your computer that may be or may be infected with malware. This we pretty much all know. What those programs then typically do, if possible, is move those files to a safe area, often renaming them in the process so that they don't get accidentally run. That safe area is often called a quarantine area or a vault or any other number of synonymous terms. There are two problems that the quarantining solves. One, you might actually still need that file. Or two, the anti-malware tool could actually be wrong. The first is rare, but consider this scenario. If your only copy of an important document is somehow flagged as containing a virus, you don't want that document to be deleted. You want it to be saved somehow so that you, or perhaps a professional, can extract what you want from that document, thereby removing the virus from the document file. Anti-malware tools typically don't know how to fix individual files that way, since it typically requires specialized knowledge of the file itself. Anti-malware tools can really only say, this file has malware, and then take steps to protect you from it by placing it into a quarantine. Now, of course, if you back up regularly, you may not need to recover a document like this from a quarantine because you could just recover it from a previous backup. The second actually happens occasionally. It's what we call a false positive. Malware scanning is incredibly complex, and it's very possible for malware tools to mistakenly flag something as malware when it isn't. What you want to be able to do then is to restore the file back to where it belongs. So the quarantine exists as a place for you to review what your anti-malware tool has found. If there's nothing there that you want to keep, deleting is in fact typically the recommended action. Remember that as long as you're also backing up regularly, deleting is even less risky. You can always recover files that you've mistakenly deleted from a recent backup taken prior to the infection. I've never tried it, but can an XP machine run without a network connection? Considering how much hassle and exposure a VM would be, wouldn't the best solution be an inexpensive, dedicated computer running XP with no network interface at all? Yeah, Windows XP can certainly run that way. You know, it's funny, we sometimes forget that when Windows XP first came out over a decade ago, networks actually weren't as common as they are now. So yes, running XP isolated, as you suggest, is one way to reduce the exposure. But it's equally critical to realize that your machine is still exposed, at least if it's to be useful. And that isolation can actually, sorta, make things worse. The issue here, of course, is preventing malware from reaching the machine. Since the majority of malware is delivered in email attachments and downloads and things like that, cutting the net, so to speak, renders those vectors, those delivery mechanisms, impossible. Besides many people wanting to keep XP specifically so that they can run Outlook Express, which requires a network connection to even be useful, the real problem here is that network-based delivery isn't the only delivery vector. For that XP machine to be useful, it probably needs to have data copied either to or from it on a somewhat regular basis. Be it on floppy disks even, or external hard disks, or USB thumb drives. All of those are additional ways that malware can still make its way onto the machine. Malware has most definitely been known to propagate over USB thumb drives. So there is still an attack surface, a way for malware to get on the machine. Now, most will say that they will take extra care to, for example, scan those drives on the other machine before attaching them to the XP machine. And that's great. To be honest, that's probably about as close to a perfect solution as you can get while still keeping the machine useful. But it relies on the person scanning each and every single time a media device of any sort is about to be moved from one machine to that XP machine. Each and every time. So don't forget. The make it worse part is simply this. The XP machine can no longer reach the internet. Well, what that means is that any anti-malware tools on the XP machine can no longer update themselves. Not only can they no longer update the software, but more importantly, they can no longer get updates to the database of known malware. Updates that we typically recommend should happen daily. With the dropping of XP support, it's those anti-malware tools that actually take over as the first best line of defense against malware on the machine. In the case like this, those tools will have been hamstrung by their inability to connect to the net. So there remain risks, absolutely. But not connecting to a network and be exceptionally diligent scanning any disk device that might get connected to that XP box can be one relatively effective way of keeping it as secure as possible for as long as possible. As long as it's still useful to you when that network is not connected. And as I mentioned earlier, that's actually not the case for many people. By now, I hope you realize that I do the Ask Leo Answercast every week. So if you've got a question about your computer, the internet, or technology in general, head out to AskLeo.com to search for an answer or to ask your question. You might hear it answered here in a future Answercast. I also put out a newsletter every week. The Ask Leo newsletter includes answers and fixes and safety tips, opinions, rants, and even the occasional answers to just why things are the way they are. Please back up. I mentioned it a couple of times in today's Answercast, and I plug it every week here at the end because it's so incredibly important. Nothing can save you from almost any disaster like a proper and recent backup. Please realize that all of my answers are based on my own personal experience and should be used entirely at your own risk. I don't know you, your abilities, or the specifics of your machine, and those kinds of details can make a huge, huge difference. The Ask Leo Answercast is a production of Ask Leo and is copyright 2014. Thanks for listening. You know me, I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be back soon with another Ask Leo Answercast.